Hello, everyone. Welcome again to this month's Dr. Jaspersoft session. We're so glad to have you here, guys. Thank you all for joining. We're bringing you this new interesting session on a very hot topic for JasperReports server. We'll be looking into how to deploy Jasper server using Docker and Kubernetes. I'm Badr Draifi from Customer Success team here at TIBCO, and my guest speaker today is also a Dr. Jaspersoft co-host, my colleague and teammate, Kamal Kumlin, who will be presenting you all the steps for setting up JasperReports server with Docker and Kubernetes. So thank you all for being here. Kamal, could you please share the screen?
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Badr. I'm gonna start the presentation right now. Okay, so you should be able to see the slide.
It's coming up now. We can see it. Thank you very much. So as you see, it's Jaspersoft JasperReports server demo. So we're gonna have a demo when Kamal is going to present to you all the steps for deploying the server with Docker and Kubernetes. Thank you. Can you go to the next slide, please? All right. So the next slide, the next session will be, stay tuned, so we can talk about the second part of deployment with Docker and Kubernetes. So in the second part, we will be more focused on the Kubernetes side. And also, like all the Dr. Jaspersoft session, it will be streamed in the second Thursday of March, in 10th March. And if you already registered, you'll be receiving email reminders, and you all you need to do is just go to our YouTube channel and view the session stream. If you're not registered, you'll still, of course, be able to see the stream, but you won't be receiving the email reminder. So if you want to be reminded a week before and a day before, please go ahead and register for our next session. Also, if you have any questions during the stream, please ask them on the YouTube, on the chat panel. We are monitoring it, and we will post the answers there too. So we'll keep an eye on all of your answers posted there. So without further ado, I'll give you the floor, Kamal. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Badr. So the slide itself is going to be very simple because we're going to go straight into the demo. Basically, in our last webinar in October with our engineering, two people from our engineering team, we went through the new builds that we published to GitHub, to our GitHub repo that's linked here in this page. So kind of describing, you know, the how they are, and I mean the changes that we've been making in the last few months. And it's kind of if you see the release notes for JasperReports Server 8.0, we now list Docker and Kubernetes deployments as kind of officially supported as well. Before it was maybe a little bit of a gray area, but now it's very clearly documented there. So that was a more kind of descriptive session, and this one is gonna be more an actual step-by-step demo of, and we'll focus initially on Docker. We'll describe in general how it is, but we'll focus on the Docker part for the demo. Okay, so I'm gonna go to first thing I want to show you actually is that repo page. You've probably seen it already in that if you've seen that webinar, but I'm just going to go through that briefly. So this is the kind of the main page. Then you enter this folder, and then from here you have kind of 4 entry points depending on what you need. So JRS, or Scalable Query Engine for Docker and Kubernetes. So we're gonna go to JRS for Docker straight away. And the demo here, sorry, the README file here has all the information you need, really. Obviously, you need to download or clone the repo. But in terms of instructions, it's quite detailed. And you can basically follow this step by step. There's different options. In this demo, we're going to go through basically the same commands are here, but basically the vanilla or the default recommended options, right? which is most cases is using Docker Compose for the building images and other activities that we need to do. So let me go basically to Visual Studio Code, which I'm using for running the commands and show you what commands we're running. So first thing, I'm going to go into this local folder that I have and clone that repository that I just showed you. So it's going to take a short time. So now here in the left panel in the Explorer, I already have that same folder, local folder opened. So with all the files that I just cloned. And so first a comment on Docker. In my case, I'm running on Mac OS and I installed Docker with Brew. You can install it in different ways, downloading directly from the Docker website. But in my case, I run this Brew command, so I just want to show you that. And then I'm gonna give you a bit of information on the environment. So first of all, Mac OS details. So 12.2, which is the latest as of today. Then we have the Docker version, which is 20.10.12, which is higher than the minimum recommended version here, which is 19.x. So we're good there. And then also the Kubernetes version, which is it's included with Docker Desktop in this case. Actually, no, I didn't want to run that command. This one. Okay, so Kubernetes version. You can see here 1.22.5, and this we're not going to need right now, but we're going to need later on for the second session next month. So let's enter the repo folder, and then the first thing we're going to do is to copy the binary of the Word file installation file, obviously for commercial edition, professional enterprise, you need to download it from eDelivery, typical eDelivery. And so in this case, I have the file already downloaded, and I'm just going to copy it locally into this folder. And then we enter this scripts folder where we can run this unpack war installer .sh, which is going to take that zip and unpack it for the building of the image. So we just change add executable permissions and run the script straight away. Okay, so they're completed. And now we go back up one directory. So we're inside the JRS directory. And if you follow the instructions, basically you'll see that one of the first things you need to do is obviously change some properties files, configuration files, environmental variables, etc. So these are mostly in the .env file and the default master.properties file. So you can edit them with VI if you want. And in our case, we can just go directly and open them here. In my case, I'm going to make one small change, just install Chromium to true so that I have Chromium included in the build, which is used for certain report functionalities. And then the other thing is the default master.properties, which I'm not going to modify. So I'm going to go directly with the vanilla one that downloaded from, cloned from the repo. But I just want to show you briefly, basically application server type, Tomcat, database type, PostgreSQL. This is quite important, it's the DB host, which is used internally in Docker to refer to the database host. And for the recommended option, which is Docker Compose, it's just called repository. So you can leave it like that. And then if you need to change anything else here, you can also change. But let's close this. And also let's close this one. So we made that small change. And next thing we do is we copy the license file, which I have in another folder here. And I'm just going to copy it to this directory resources license inside the repo. So my local repo, cloned repo. So, okay, the license file is copied, and then I can just go ahead with the build, right? So if I run Docker PS, there's no containers running at the moment. So I'm gonna build the images, and this should take a couple of minutes. So it's downloading stuff and building everything from scratch basically, and obviously using that zip file, unpacked zip file that we used before. Okay, this actually was quite fast. Completed, and let's check again. Still, there shouldn't be containers running because we just built the images. But as we're here, I want to show you in VS Code, there's a Docker extension that you can use, and it's very useful for doing everything from here, and you can see the images, the containers running, etc. So we're going to use this in a moment.
Just a question here. So we do this. This container deployment command. Just want to make sure this file does not. It's a file that you created. It has the different command steps to deploy Docker, to deploy Jasper Server with Docker. This is not something that there is on our GitHub page, right?
No, all these commands, they're there. So for the license file, they describe the fact that you need to install the license file in this folder, etc. So some additional commands like this one to check the running containers, they're not there, but this is just because they assume that obviously a bit of Docker, how Docker works. So, but the important commands like the build commands and everything, they're all there. So I'm going to show that in a moment because the next Docker Compose is going to take a couple minutes. So while that's running, I'm going to show a couple things from the README.
Okay, so the steps that you have here, cd and cp and all those commands with all these steps, this is something also like we can get from GitHub, or this is just your file?
See, this file here, I created it. It's just to guide the demo, to get the demo, and we can probably share that as well. There's no secrets here, and you can see it obviously on screen. So, but again, most of the commands, depending on the options that you choose during the installation, again, I'm going with the recommended kind of path and the default options to show the simplest scenario, but then you might need to do things a bit differently. So it's recommended to go through the README that's there. Also because sometimes we update it, right? So we might make changes in the future. So you might want to refer to that one as a reference.
Thank you. That answer that clear things up. Thank you.
No worries, no worries. And by the way, I'm going to stop my video as well now so that we can fully focus on the demo part. Okay, so we've done that. The next step is the key stores, right? So I wanna. It's kind of important, this part here, because sorry, let me run that command. So first of all, in this directory, there's nothing at the moment, only a README file. So there's no key store files. I'm gonna run use Docker run in this case to generate the key store files. So, and then we'll check. So there's a comment there. Only takes a few seconds. Okay. So build successful. Now I'm gonna run the list again. So the files are there now, and but I need to run this chmod to change the permissions. Okay, and that's it. So now, again, I'm just running again just to make sure. And so the permissions are correct. The files are there. Now we can go ahead with the actual the build-o-matic. So it's an image that we have here to do certain activities, build certain components, etc. And the main one, the most important one, I guess, is the setting up the repository, right? So we're gonna run this straight away because it takes a moment. And while this runs, it's gonna run the container, the build-o-matic container, and start a PostgreSQL based on our properties instance, and load all basically create the repository database and load all the resources there for the kind of vanilla or base repository. It's also going to create the sample databases. If you don't want the samples installed, there are options for that, but basically create the sample databases, load the sample data and the sample reports, everything there. So we'll have a fully functioning repository at the end of this. So this is basically importing the resources. You can see here in the terminal. While this is happening, I will first of all I will remove this stopped container here, which is not required. The one that's running right now, it's the one that's used. It's being used, but this one is the one that we created before. So I'm just going to remove it. It's not going to do anything or affect anything. Okay. While this is running, I'm going to talk about a couple more things. So if you have a local dev or test system, it's important that you in Docker that you set the memory resources correctly, right? Otherwise, things are not going to work, and containers might just crash without much notice. Excuse me, I'm drinking some water. So I'm just describing here that the minimum requirements. In general, this you can see this in installation guide, but basically for a single container or single instance of JasperReports server, I would recommend 5 GB of memory available to Docker. If you're running a cluster with 2 instances, I would say at least 9. So you'll see, I'll show you later that by default it's going to use a bit less. I mean, when you start up Tomcat, it's just going to use about 2 GB. But obviously, you need to leave a little bit of margin for when you're actually running stuff. It's gonna use more memory, and it's probably better to increase the swap size too in Docker. So I'm gonna show that to you very briefly. And so in Docker, this is the kind of Docker desktop dashboard. You go to settings and then preferences and then resources, and you have your basic resources here. CPUs, I didn't change that from the default, but I guess that depends on also on your machine. But the memory I did increase to 9 because we're going to show the cluster later, and the swap I also increased to the maximum, which is 4 gigabytes. So I'm going to close this. We don't need it for now. And yeah, so that's pretty much. I mean, it's going to be enough for, again, a dev or a test system. But obviously, if you plan to use this in production, I would recommend that you set the memory according to the load that you expect, obviously. So it's going to be probably more than what I showed you. So now it's loading the Sugar CRM DB. So we're nearly finished. I think it's the last part here. So while this is running, I guess, let me see what else I can show you. Actually, yeah, let's go back to the README file for a moment, so that you get a bit more information there. So we're basically to this step here, right? Repository setup, and as I mentioned before, there's different ways of doing it. We're using the recommended way, which is Docker Compose, which is the easiest. But if you have different scenarios, you might want to have, for example, use Docker run without samples, Docker run with samples. And the other thing is you might want to actually have the database, use an external database already set up somewhere else, for the repo. And so there are instructions for that as well. And you will have to change the .env file and other properties file. And then once this is done, basically we go to the actual deployment of the application. Okay, so this is completed. 3 minutes, well, 4 minutes on the system. Again, this container is stopped now. It's not required anymore. You don't have to remove it, but I will remove it just for tidy up here. Okay, so next step is the actual deployment deployment of the application, right? So the web app. So Postgres is up and running there already. It has a persistent volume that it's used for the database, so that obviously things are not lost between restarting the container. And that's it. Let's go ahead with deployment, the actual deployment. So you see here we have 2 additional containers. One is the actual web app. If I hover here, I'll see some information on it, ports, etc., default ports, and then we have active MQ, which is used as a caching layer. This is mostly needed for the cluster deployment, but for kind of simplicity of configuration, this is being deployed also for the single instance. Okay, so first of all, let's check the actual Tomcat is up and running. So we can click here and view logs. So this is an exception that you can ignore. It's a known issue, but so it's still starting. And I'm going to open the browser now so that actually it's not there, it's here. So
comment just about the active MQ. So even when we were using Jasper server just as a one single instance, so we actually install active MQ also.
Yeah, so in this deployment, yes. So it's basically, I'm not going to go into details of it, but it's basically a matter of dependencies and simplicity of configuration. It's a very small component, so it's not going to affect much. If it needs to be optimized, probably we might be able to optimize it to remove it for a single instance. But to be honest, I would expect that most people would hopefully deploy cluster multiple instances. Nowadays, you want more scalability. But let me finish this part of the demo, and then we might go back to that maybe. So I just want to finish up this part here. We go back to that. Okay, so it's up and running, right? So you can see the web UI, and I logged in as super user. You just pass in the username and password directly here to make it faster. And we're just gonna go and open a repository. I mean, a report in the repository. Let's say revenue detail report. So obviously the first time you run these things takes a little bit longer. And this is all based on the sample data that we talked about before. And this is based on FoodMart. Okay, so the report is up and running, it's fine. We go back to the home page and we see in the recent items here, the report that we just run. I just pointed this out to show you something later about this. So let's go back to the script. So I wanted to show you briefly the memory usage, or resources usage. So you can see here the 3 containers, what they're using at the moment. CPU is very low, obviously, because there's not much happening, but then you can see the memory and other resources. Now, this is currently running on HTTP port 8080. If you want to, let's say, have a TLS or SSL kind of front end or proxy or load balancer in front of it, it's obviously possible. I'll show you a simple option with using Nginx. And in this case, I'm going to run it directly from my machine. It doesn't matter. It's not running in Docker, but first I'm going to open this page. And okay, it's already running. So it is still running from before. So let me show you. Actually, I'm going to kind of stop it. And again, this is installed through Brew. So Nginx for simplicity. Okay, so it stopped. Now, if we go to this page again in HTTPS, it will fail, and then we start it again. Just to show you kind of that's what's serving the page. And there you go. So we have HTTPS here. The configuration is quite straightforward. There's a wiki article on that for Nginx. You can find that easily. I'll show you my configuration here very simple. The main part is this one, right? So localhost 8080 and yeah, listen on 443. Okay, so that's for the single instance. We're kind of done with this part. Next, let's bring it down. Basically, we can either use the stop command or the down command. I'm going to show you from the UI here. We can do it directly here. Basically, right click, compose down. Okay, so it's running there. So it removed everything, right? So even the PostgreSQL. I just wanted to show you that because the idea is that basically, okay, also PostgreSQL, you can stop it because the volume is still there, right? So we can, once we restart it, it's going to pick up that volume, and that's it. So in this case, we're using this this file here, the cluster docker compose, which, by the way, you could even start it from here and open it, and obviously make changes if you need to. Okay, so let's start it from here. And by the way, this should be down at the moment because it hasn't fully started yet. And also 8080. Now the default port for the cluster is different, so it's gonna actually go through. Let me show you here. It's gonna go through HA proxy. By default, we go with this proxy on port 80, and in fact, I changed the command here. So let's run that. And in terms of, it's still running. So I'll show you the Docker stats. The CPU is quite high because Tomcat is still starting here for this too. So basically, once we see the CPU down here, it means the startup completed, and this page is still waiting, obviously. So that shouldn't take long. And yeah, I mean, just as I was saying before, for ActiveMQ, 200 megabytes of memory, for HA proxy, even less. I mean, it's like very tiny. So it's really not an issue to run those things. But obviously, in your setup, you might want to use different cache layers and different load balancers or proxies. In production environment, it's quite likely you're going to run it, separately in some other appliance. Okay, so the CPUs are down for those two, and so we should be up and running here. In fact, it's running on port 80, and that's it. And oh, by the way, the recent items, again, as super user, you see the report is still there because it's the same database. We're just pointing to the same database, in this case with the cluster. So obviously this data is coming from the database, so we'll see the report there. So I think I'm done with the demo part. I don't know if Badr, you have any quick question yourself before I stop the sharing, or should we continue with the slides?
Well, just to come back to the ActiveMQ. So is it mandatory to have an ActiveMQ, even like, let's say our use case is just to use Jasper Server with Docker in one single instance?
Oh yeah, sorry, the ActiveMQ. I don't think so. I don't think it's needed. Again, as you know, right? I mean, you can run Jasper without ActiveMQ by itself. So from that point of view, it's not a strong requirement. It's more about the way the deployment scripts are built now. So I think we can maybe add the comment, a more specific comment in the README. So I'll discuss with engineering just to kind of clarify that. I'll also add that question
Just maybe we can, we can like bypass this ActiveMQ creation, because some of the time I might not want to set up
sure.
an ActiveMQ in my environment.
Absolutely, but again, these instructions are really for simple. Just as a reminder, for simple dev test environment that you want to set up, up and running quickly. So you just go with the kind of vanilla or default options, and it's just yeah, I mean, it's not going to impact anything really in terms of the system. So for simplicity, I would just leave it like that for now. Now for a production environment, you're gonna change a lot of these things. You're not gonna run things as they are. Again, this is more for having a vanilla, quick installation, like as you would do, let's say, with installer, right? You download the JasperReports server installer. You have a graphical UI, click, next, and you have an environment up and running quickly. In this case, you do it with Docker. Once you have your commands, there saved in a script, you basically, any time you need an instance, you can just deploy it like that very quickly. So again, but it's a good point. I'll talk with engineering to update the README page so that they can maybe describe that in a bit more detail.
Yes, we'll note this for yes, for our so our end users will be aware as well in our GitHub page. And my next comment actually will be in the volumes. Are we in the earlier versions of Jasper Server with Docker, we use the volumes to handle all the customizations and configurations of Jasper Server? Right. Are we still doing the same in the same way, or something changed on that regard?
So it's I think the environmental variables, and we can maybe show that briefly, but might have changed the names or something. But so Tomcat base image, etc. So let me see. I mean, we don't do. I mean, in this scenario, we don't do any customizations here. But basically, the point from Butter being, if you have custom, well, if you have any custom configuration, obviously that is not in the vanilla configuration, you have two options, right? Basically, option one is to use an external directory that it's being picked up when you start the container. And option two would be, you might want to kind of bake that into the image. So make the required changes in the files. So once you expand that zip file, as we did done before, you can make the changes there. And then once you build that image, it's going to contain those changes already. There's pros and cons in the two approaches. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that can be done. We don't go into details in this session. We want to keep it quite focused on kind of step-by-step deployment. But just go through the README, and it's all described there, how to do that. Okay, so unless there's other questions, I think I'll go to this last page. Butter, you want to talk through this one? We'll actually start in presentation mode. Can you see full screen, the slide?
I can see your slide, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, so thank you so much, Kamal. That was a great presentation and very rich demo. So guys, this is our resources for any further reference. Please go to the customer success orientation guide, and we have our quick start guide and our community landing page for all of our Dr. Jaspersoft, and also the previous webinars and previous recordings. You find them in the community website. So for any other questions or remarks, please always reach out to your customer success manager if you're on a Upshift program. Otherwise, shoot us an email to drjaspersoft@tipco.com. I think Kamal has
the last slide, yeah.
Great. So yeah, anything related to our sessions, please send us an email to drjaspersoft@tipco.com. Also, you can ask the community directly, and we'll try to answer your questions as soon as we can. The recording of these sessions, FYI, will be put on our YouTube channel, Dr. Jaspersoft, Jaspersoft embedded YouTube channel.
I mean, the playlist, we have it there in the
great, yeah. So
link,
we already have the YouTube playlist, and yeah, so it will be there right after we finish this stream.
Okay.
That will be all for me. Actually, Kamal, do you have anything to add?
No, that's all. Thanks very much, Badr. I look forward to the next session, and please feel free to continue asking questions in the chat, and later on either use the forum as we showed before, or the email, or potentially even add questions to comments to the YouTube video, although that's not monitored constantly, but we'll try to do our best to answer those questions. So yeah, that's all really. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, Kamal, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.